This will be recorded and presented to all of our guests at the end of the program, as well as the slides for your reference. There's going to be a lot of information on the slides, so I know that will be very helpful for everyone. But with that, enough from me. Let's turn it over to the man of the hour, Craig Miller, the Task Force Chair and General Manager of Western Municipal Water District. Take it away, Craig.
Thank you, Michael. Really glad we have an amazing staff to put these events together. Thank you very much for spending your Friday morning early with us. We really appreciate it. The enthusiasm for this event just keeps growing. So if, in case you're not paying attention, you've tuned into the Riverside County Water Task Force series. This is a series that we put a lot of pride in, and it's our opportunity to reach out, hopefully outside of the water industry a little bit, and touch some other people that maybe aren't as in tune with our day-to-day activities. But very important that we get the word out on what's going on in the water world. So as Michael said, I'm the chair of the Riverside County Task Force. I'm also the general manager at Western Municipal Water District. Joining us also today will be the vice chair, Jason Uli, who is been a great partner at the task force and brings a little different perspective than just the straight water agencies, but he brings that flood control perspective and the county perspective. So we're trying to make this group a little broader than just water. And that's why we're so happy that we get so many attendees these days from all different aspects of Riverside County and other areas. So the Riverside County Water Task Force is led by Eastern Municipal Water District and WRCOG. You know, our role is to coordinate a speaker series to try and develop a broad-based education program for the county. It's a collaboration of public, private agencies trying to address current, future water issues in a collaborative manner. Collaborate is important. You know, we're doing this virtually, so it's a little challenging to collaborate sometimes, but we do have our chat feature today, so please collaborate amongst yourselves with the chat feature. I know we would prefer to be doing this in person, and hopefully we get back there soon to doing that, but chatting is about the best we have. So we like seeing your cameras on, and use that chat feature. That is also how we'll be asking questions today. So you can do it the old-fashioned way of raising your hand, but probably easier if you use the chat feature, and we'll be handing those questions out to the speakers as they come in. And I would like to hold the question and answer session to the end so the speakers have an opportunity to get through their presentations. So let's get rolling for today. So today's theme is tapping into our funding opportunities. So you've seen, we've done housekeeping. We'll get into a regional update with Chris Gray. We have our panel discussion, tapping into funding opportunities. So we have Vincent Lopez from Eastern Municipal Water District, Amanda Erath from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and John Wynn from the California Department of Water Resources. And then we'll follow up, like I said, with a question and answer, and then some closing remarks. So it's really interesting times in the water industry. This is our time as staff to maybe impress our bosses. So we put together a lineup of experts in getting funding, and getting funding is important. So for all of you staffers who are in charge of getting funding, this is your inside track. We're bringing experts to you so you have the inside scoop on how to get funding for your agency. I don't think ever in my career of 30 years doing this in the water industry, I've ever seen more opportunities to pursue grant funding. It's very unique, both on the federal and the state side. There are tons of opportunities. I know at Western, we've been very fortunate to land quite a few grants over the last couple of years, and especially recently. So this is a very, very appropriate presentation at this time. So bring your questions, get prepared. You've got experts here to help you out. I don't know when we've ever had a more pivotal time in the water industry. There's a reason that all this funding is out there. It's because both the federal and the state government understands how critical water infrastructure is. And with drought and climate change, it's really hard to know how to plan our future water resources. If you look at some of the things that have just been happening lately in our own water world, the state or the feds just announced a 0% allocation on the CVP project. That's for Central Valley Ag, zero water available. We have a 15% allocation on the state water project. That was zero. Thank goodness we got some snow in December. It's up to 15%. So that's for all the state contractors, that's not very much water. And that's going to be shared between ag and urban and, everyone else. We're seeing more significant climate variability impacts. We're seeing wetter storms and drier dry periods, longer dry periods. Didn't have any rain at all, hardly, in January and through February. So, it's very challenging for water districts. And what we're finding in California is that the state is really pushing water agencies to be self-sufficient and fix the drought and climate resiliency on your own. So this is why we need this funding injected into our budgets. So very, very important topic. Glad we're here to do this. So let's get going. Let's go to the next slide. So before we get going, I would like to hear an update from Chris Gray. Chris is the executive director of the Western Riverside Council of Governments. They're one of the co-founders of this group. So Chris, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Next slide, please. So as Craig said, I'm WRCOG's Deputy Executive Director. I'm here to provide a regional update. Next slide, please. So I'm excited to announce that WRCOG has recently completed and adopted a strategic plan. The strategic plan guides us for the next 5 years. This was developed with input from our members, our board members, and adopted through WRCOG's executive committee, which is composed of one elected official from each member, each of WRCOG's member agencies. And I would point out that WRCOG is unique as a COG or regional government, where two of our members are the water districts. Eastern and Western are both official voting members of our executive committee, and those executive committee members and their staff had significant input on our strategic plan with all members. I won't read these documents to you. I just want to point out we adopted a mission statement that really focuses on critical infrastructure projects and programs, including water. And then our vision statement talked about facilitating investments in transportation and infrastructure. So we're excited to be part of the meeting today. Next slide, please. One thing I wanted to call out to you is these are the 7 goals from our new strategic plan. And by the way, our strategic plan is available on our website, so you can read the document in full. But a couple items that were important is they specifically asked us to prioritize securing funding for our member agencies. So one of the services WRCOG provides is we do provide grant writing services for our members for certain types of grants. So instead of agencies paying for grant writing themselves, we provide that service, and we also provide a grant compendium every 2 weeks. So what I wanted to amplify something that Craig said is increasingly across the board, infrastructure funding is driven by grants, whether it's broadband, it's water, it's transportation, it's utility infrastructure. The state and the federal government have in our opinion, made an explicit decision to move more funding towards grants. And so that's why we believe it's absolutely critical that agencies that are working in these fields be aware of the grants, have strategies to secure the grants, and do the best job they can at getting those grants. Next slide, please. So I'm also pleased to announce that after 2 years of COVID, WRCOG is returning to an in-person General Assembly. Many of you on the phone today are folks who've been at our General Assembly in years before. So I'm excited to announce that we've secured Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple Inc. You may remember it was Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Jobs that started Apple Computer. And Steve Wozniak's going to tell us about what it was like working with Steve Jobs, founding Apple Computer, what it was like working in Silicon Valley. And he's also embarked on a number of philanthropic efforts since he stepped away from the company. Our General Assembly will be on June 23rd at the usual time, 6:30 to 8:30 at Pechanga Resort and Casino, where we had it. Our last in-person General Assembly was in 2019, and I hope to see all of you there. And that will be it from me. Thank you so much.
All right, Chris, thank you. I'm happy you're getting back together in person. For those of you who haven't been to that event, that's an outstanding event. They get a huge turnout. And I'm not sure which is better, the networking before the event or the event itself, but WRCOG puts on a great show if you haven't been there. And Chris, thank you again for everything WRCOG does. We need to broaden our audience, and that's what WRCOG is bringing to the table, is we get to talk with a different group that are decision makers in other areas. So it's great to have you on board and WRCOG involved. So let's get going with our panel now. Our first speaker is Vincent Lopez. Sorry, let me get my my bio here. There, I got it. Vincent recently joined Eastern Municipal last year and oversees project control and grant administration programs and processes related to Eastern's capital improvement program. Prior to joining Eastern, he worked with the city of Cathedral City, where he managed capital projects and grant funding programs. Vincent, great to have you with us. It's all you.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. So this morning, I'm going to briefly go over some of the strategies that have been successful here at Eastern Municipal in obtaining some external grant funding. Next slide, please. So just a quick agenda for today. I'm going to quickly cover and mention a couple quick facts about EMWD for those that may be on the call who EMWD. Go through the 4 strategies in successful grant management, and then summarize it and recap everything at the end. Next slide, please. So just a quick facts about EMWD. EMWD has a 5-division publicly elected board of directors. It currently has more than 600 employees, and it operates on an annual budget of $441 million. The 5-year CIP is currently averaging about $534 million, and it has more than 180 capital projects going on, and it's the 6th largest public utility in California. Next slide, please. So just to give an idea where EMWD is situated, it is located in the western part of Riverside County, and it's between Moreno Valley and Temecula. So it includes 7 cities and some unincorporated areas of Riverside County. It's one of 26 member agencies of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and Director Randy Record is our representative at the EMWD. Next slide. So one of the reasons why EMWD has been successful in obtaining grant funding is because grant funding is actually part of the district's strategic plan. So this strategic plan identifies 7 priorities. One of those priorities is fiscal responsibility and appropriate investment. And what that means is ensuring financial stability and demonstrating responsible stewardship in public funds. So how we achieve that is through the aggressive pursuit of grant funding to reduce the financial burden of our customers. So grant funding and external funding provides the foundation for a successful grant program. Next slide, please. So beginning with the first strategy, grant management. Next slide. So in order to have a successful grant management program, it's important to have a good grant management team. Here at Eastern, we have 2 grant analysts, one on the pre-award side and then the other one on the post-award side. On the pre-award side, this staff member is responsible for filtering the external funding opportunities that come our way. And along with that, we have 4 on-call consultants to provide support and are readily available to provide to prepare some of the grant applications and submit them on our behalf. On the post-award side, a grant analyst is responsible for all the compliance on the agreement and a lot of the labor compliance and preparing some of the grant reimbursements for the district. And then just like the pre-award side, we also have 3 on-call consultants that are available to provide that support. We also have labor compliance support and of course, organizational support. And all that begins with our board of directors and our general manager. And then also some key stakeholders within the district, such as finance, inspection, construction administration, and engineering. And then all this is managed through our grant management tracking tool. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go over all the items there, but some of the key and important ones to note when looking for external funding opportunities that have been successful here at Eastern. Most of the information that we get comes from our federal and state lobbyists, and that's filtered through our public and governmental affairs group. And they do a fantastic job keeping us abreast of all these opportunities that are on the horizon. Some of the other things that have been successful for us is also through agency program contacts. Well, we also get emails from some of the funding agencies about some of the opportunities that are currently available. And then we also attend some funding and fairs and webinars. And of course, we also look through some of the online tools that you see there, such as eCivis. Next slide, please. So one important strategy that has been successful for us is during the planning of external funding is identifying the strategic goals, not only of EMWD, but also for the goals of the funding agency. What are they aim to accomplish with this external funding? So it is important to align the external funding opportunities with some of the projects that you have coming up. And the way we do that is we identify some of the opportunities for phasing some of the projects. Can this project be broken down into phases? And if it can, the more phases and that it can be broken down into, the more opportunities there are for some other external funding opportunities. And of course, align these phases with the external funding opportunities. And in the end, hopefully you have an externally funded project. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to funding agency calibration. So it is important to reach out to the funding agency, set up meetings, ask questions such as, how competitive your project is or your program is in comparison to the external funding. Ask questions regarding some of the application material for the external funding opportunity. So the whole point is to get support early for your project. And in that process, you'll develop some positive working relationships with the external funding agency as well. Next slide, please. Okay, CIP integration. It is important to, I mentioned it a little bit in the previous slides, but it's important to align the external funding opportunity with some of the projects you have going on or coming up. So, and the way we do this is we review the 5-year CIP. We look at the funding opportunity and also look at what type of projects we have coming up, whether they are water related, wastewater related, or recycled water related. What are the project costs for some of these projects? And then we also look at some of the schedules, so we can align the timing of the of the external funding with some of the projects. And then we also can also take a look at some of the benefits. What is our projects aim to accomplish? What are the benefits, or what are the external funding opportunities aim to accomplish? So we try to align all those between the external funding opportunity and some of our projects. So strategically thinking through the application's competitive strength is also important. We also look at the priorities, the objectives, consideration of some of the weighted criteria in the funding opportunity is also important. And then financial contribution. Is there a match, required for some of the external funding opportunities? And then also community support is also important as well. Next slide, please. So this is just an excerpt of a database that we have put together internally to kind of track some of our grant funding opportunities. As you can see on the left, is a list of some of the projects, and in the middle, it's information regarding some of the external funding opportunities, some alignment there. But most importantly, on the right-hand side, the two columns over there, we also take a look at where the environmental is on some of these projects that are coming up. Where are we with that? Has it been completed, or is it in process? Are we waiting on any information? Same thing with real property. Have we obtained the property needed for some of our projects that are coming up? Do we have easements? Have they been attained? So this is just a quick excerpt of how we do some of that alignment. Next slide, please. So it's also important to get district-wide support on your efforts for pursuing grant funding. So here at Eastern, each month my team and I host a grant and loans committee meeting. And this is comprised of executive management and some key stakeholders from other departments. And some of the topics that we discuss is, first of all, we go through some of the applications that we already have submitted. So we provide an update to the group on that. Then we discuss some of the applications that we are currently working on or in the queue. And then we introduce some new funding opportunities and discuss some possible project alignment with the group. And then we discuss some of the impacts to the CIP and some of the projects. And then from there, we get committee direction on how to move forward with some of these grant applications. In addition to that, we also meet with our finance team and our conservation team just to calibrate and see if our conservation group also has any other upcoming external funding opportunities that they wish to kind of pursue. Next slide, please. So bid compliance towards the end, if you've been successful in getting an award for some grant funding, it is also important to comply with some of the requirements of the agreement as well. Next slide, please. So on the post-award side, it is important once you're getting ready to bid out the project that we include some of the compliance language in the specifications and some of the agreements. Be proactive and obtain the necessary labor compliance if it's applicable to the external funding program. Also, when preparing some of the reimbursements, it's important to take a look at anything that's applicable to that's eligible for cost reimbursement, and then also just some of the reporting that the reports that we have compiled as part of our grant reimbursement are some invoices, progress reports, financial reports, specialized reports, final reports, and performance reports. All this is submitted to the funding agency for reimbursement. Next slide, please. So pretty much in summary, in order to have a successful grant program really depends on a strong grant management team. So some strategic alignment with not only with the external funding agency and their goals, but also internally with the agency's goals and the project as well. It's also important to gain organizational support and buy-in from executive management all the way down to other stakeholders in your organization. And of course, be in compliance with some of the agreement and some of the terms and requirements of the external funding opportunities. And of course, it's always important to maintain a positive working relationship with the external funding agencies as well. So it was a lot of information, but this concludes my presentation. And
All right.
that's it.
Thank you, Vincent. That was great. Yeah, Eastern is in a great position to have a team that's dedicated to doing this work. As Chris Gray mentioned before, they're helping others with grant applications, and not all agencies are in a position to have the resources to have a dedicated team of experts. So it's great to hear from you, Vincent, and you guys really have an outstanding program. You've been very successful. I'm curious to hear some of the questions the audience may have for you. Remember, go ahead and chat those questions if they come up as the speaker is talking, and we will get to them later in the program. All right, well, let's move on to our second speaker. Our second panelist is Amanda Erath. Amanda is a program analyst for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and has worked in the Water Resources and Planning Office in Reclamation's Denver office for 12 years. She leads multiple reclamation-wide teams and manages the Title 16 Water Reclamation and Reuse Program, Wind Desalination Construction Project Funding, and the Basin Studies Program. With that, I will turn it over to Amanda.
Craig. Thanks for having me here today. Excited to talk about some of our programs that are part of WaterSmart. As Craig mentioned, I am in the Water Resources and Planning Office at Reclamation, and our office is essentially the office that manages WaterSmart as a whole. So WaterSmart is an umbrella program. It includes lots of different activities and programs, and our group is made up of the program coordinators for all those different parts of WaterSmart. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on funding that has been allocated to the WaterSmart program through the bipartisan infrastructure law. But keep in mind that there are other parts of WaterSmart that I'm not going to talk about today. So, there's lots of opportunities out there, and feel free to check out our website, which I have a link to at the end here. So next slide, please. So the WaterSmart program received a lot of different funding amounts under the bipartisan infrastructure law for multiple activities. This table kind of shows you all of them in one place. And these are the activities that I'm going to talk a little bit about today, each one individually. But this is just so you can kind of see all the amounts in one table that were allocated to WaterSmart activities in the BIL. Next slide, please. I'm going to start off talking about the Title 16 Water Reclamation and Reuse Program. As Craig mentioned, I am the program coordinator for this program, so obviously it's my favorite, and I'm going to talk about it first. So Title 16 has been around since 1992, so it is one of the older parts of WaterSmart. I'm guessing a lot of folks on the line here today are at least somewhat familiar with the Title 16 program, but just a little bit of background. When the program was established in 1992, from that time basically through 2016, in order to receive funding under the program, a project had to be specifically authorized by Congress. So in those years, we essentially ended up with a universe of authorized projects. There were 53 congressionally authorized projects that were Title 16 projects. Then in end of 2016, December 2016, Congress passed the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, which we call the WIN Act. And that included amendments to the Title 16 authority, which opened the program up to new projects so that you no longer had to have a project-specific congressional authorization. Instead, you could submit a feasibility study to Reclamation. Reclamation would review that feasibility study and in the process make the determinations required by the WIN Act for the project to then be eligible to compete for funding. One thing to mention, since I just said compete for funding, pretty much all of the activities under WaterSmart, we allocate the funding through a competitive process. That process is really similar for all the different programs and essentially consists of a funding opportunity that we post on grants.gov, inviting applicants to submit their proposals for funding. We then convene application review committees made up of staff from all over Reclamation that review the applications we've received, apply the evaluation criteria that were identified in that particular funding opportunity, and score the proposals based on those evaluation criteria. And then the scores are used to rank the projects, and that's how we allocate the available funding, is basically going down that ranked order so that the highest ranked projects receive funding. And so that's just a little background on our competitive process that we use pretty much across the board for WaterSmart, including for Title 16. So the Title 16 program now has these two different types of projects that are eligible: congressionally authorized projects and then the new WIN projects. I believe there's just over 60 new WIN projects now that are eligible, and we're adding more all the time. There are two basic types of projects under the Title 16 program. One is projects that are reusing wastewater, and that can be municipal wastewater, agricultural wastewater, industrial wastewater, any of those types qualify. And then the other is projects that are reclaiming and reusing impaired ground or surface water. There is a non-federal cost share required under all parts of WaterSmart, including Title 16. Under Title 16, the non-federal cost share requirement is 75% of the total project cost. So we can provide up to 25% of the project cost. And we actually have our funding opportunity for Title 16 out right now on grants.gov. It was posted on January 14th, and we actually have two out. One is for congressionally authorized Title 16 projects, and one is for those WIN Act Title 16 projects. Applications under both of those are due March 15th. So that's coming up here quick. In terms of funding amounts, the Title 16 program received $550 million in the bipartisan infrastructure law over the 5-year period that the law covers. Each year, Reclamation will be doing a spend plan for the BIL funding that we receive in that given year. So in the fiscal year 2022 spend plan, there's $245 million for the Title 16 program. So we'll be using that funding opportunity that's currently open to allocate that $245 million in BIL funding, as well as any additional FY22 appropriations that we get for the program. We obviously don't have enacted appropriations yet for fiscal year 2022, so that's still kind of a question mark for us. But if there are appropriations for the program, those will also be allocated through this funding opportunity that's open right now. Next slide, please. Large-scale water recycling. This is a new authority that was included in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So this is a new program that we're developing right now. So mostly what I have on the slide here is actually what's in the law, because this is all still under development. So the law identifies the eligible applicants for this program as states, Indian tribes, municipalities, irrigation districts, wastewater districts, or other organizations with water or power delivery authority. For those of you familiar with WaterSmart, that language will probably sound really familiar. It's very much in line with the eligibility for most parts of WaterSmart, with a few exceptions. Eligible projects are the same as Title 16 in that it's projects that are reclaiming and reusing different types of wastewater, or reclaiming and reusing impaired ground or surface water. The big difference here is that eligible projects have to have a total project cost of $500 million or more. So that's the main difference between this new program and the Title 16 program, is the size of the project. It really is meant to be for those much larger projects, and Title 16 is for the smaller scale projects that come in under $500 million in total project cost. The other main difference is that under the Title 16 program, there is a $30 million per project cap. Whereas under this new large scale water recycling program, the law very specifically states that there is no per project cap. However, there is still a non-federal cost share required and a maximum federal cost share. So the non-federal cost share is 75%. Again, the federal cost share is 25%, just like Title 16, and that is a maximum. So we cannot provide more than 25% of the total project cost of these projects. The funding in the BIL for this new program is $450 million over 5 years. There is no funding in the fiscal year 2022 spend plan for this program yet because it's new and we're still working on developing it. But we do anticipate having funding in the spend plan in 2023. In the meantime, we're working on developing a draft framework for this new program and requirements for these new projects, which we hope to have out this summer. There'll then be an opportunity for public comment on that framework. And we're hoping to then release a funding opportunity for these projects in 2023. And when I say 2023, I mean fiscal year. So it could be, potentially could be fall or winter of calendar year 2022, but it would be fiscal year 2023 for the federal government. If you have any thoughts or ideas about this, obviously there'll be that opportunity for public comment on the framework in the summer. But if you have things you want to share with us now, please feel free to go ahead and submit those. You can email them to us. You can send us a letter. We're always happy to hear input on these things as we're developing them. Next slide, please. Water desalination. So the WIN Act also included an authority that was new to reclamation at the time for providing funding for construction of full-scale ocean and brackish water desalination projects. This program is very similar to Title 16 in that there's a 75% federal cost share required. Maximum federal cost share is 25% of the total project cost, up to that per project cap of $30 million, the same as Title 16. Also, the same as Title 16, our funding opportunity for this program is out right now, out on grants.gov. It was posted the same day, so January 14th, and applications are due March 15th. This program also received funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's $250 million for desalination projects over the 5-year period. The fiscal year 2023 spend plan includes $15 million for these projects. So we will be using that open funding opportunity to allocate that $15 million in BIL funding, as well, again, as any additional funding that we get through fiscal year 2022 appropriations, which have not been enacted yet. Next slide, please. Water Smart grants. This is another activity that's been around for quite a while. That's now part of Water Smart. I think we started out in 2004. I think maybe they were called challenge grants back then. So most folks are probably somewhat familiar with these. These are basically water and or energy conservation projects. You know, the most classic Water Smart grants project is that you're lining or piping a canal, but it also includes things like metering, flow measurement, landscape irrigation measures. So there's a lot of different things that are included here. Eligible applicants are going to sound somewhat familiar in that it's states, tribes, districts, local governments, also includes nonprofits and regional authorities. And you'll note here, and this really applies, I don't know that anyone, this is going to be an issue for anybody on this call, since I think everybody is in the Western states, but just to note, all parts of Water Smart are limited to the 17 Western states. And then there is some differences across the programs in terms of whether Hawaii and Alaska are eligible, and then the territories that have been added to the reclamation law. Funding for these projects, again, there's a non-federal cost share required, 50% non-federal cost share here, so up to a maximum of 50% federal funding per project. Water Smart grants did receive funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's $400 million available over the next 5 years. This year's spend plan included $160 million for Water Smart grants. So we will be allocating that here this fiscal year. Next slide, please. Oh, and one other thing note on Water Smart grants is that we do expect, because of that BIL funding, to see increased per project funding amounts. Environmental water resources projects. This is a newer activity. So this authority came through a revision to the Secure Water Act recently. So this is something that we are working on developing. The funding for these projects in terms of the BIL, it'll be part of that $400 million in Water Smart grant funding that I just spoke about. And then there's also $100 million in the bipartisan infrastructure law for our cooperative watershed management program. And we'll be using some of that here as well, since that program included some implementation projects, or what we call phase 2 projects, that I think are going to be sort of folded in with this new funding opportunity. So eligible project type here are similar to the water and energy efficiency projects that we just talked about under Water Smart grants, with the main difference that the improvements that you're making here are focused on impacts to ecological values. So essentially, these are projects where the majority of the benefits are going to be for ecological values, and that's the main difference here. So you may see similar types of projects, but the goal of the benefits will be slightly different. The cost share here is a little different. So the non-federal cost share varies. It could be up to 50% required. So we can provide up to 75% in federal funding for these projects, which is a slightly larger federal cost share than you'll see under a lot of other parts of Water Smart. Next slide, please. Multi-benefit projects to improve watershed health. This is another new authority. This was a new authority provided to us in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which includes $100 million for these projects over the 5-year period. There is no funding in this year's spend plan for this activity because it is a brand new authority. So much like the large-scale water recycling program, we're just working on developing this right now, and we don't anticipate any funding for this program until 2023. Eligible project types under this new activity include the design, implementation, and monitoring of habitat restoration projects that improve watershed health. One thing to note here is that these projects are limited to basins that are impacted by a reclamation project. So that is a little bit narrower than most of our other parts of Water Smart. The cost share here is similar to the environmental water resources projects in that it can vary from 25 to 50% non-federal cost share. So again, we can provide up to a maximum of 75% in federal cost share. As I just mentioned, it's a new program, so it's still under development, and we don't anticipate any funding opportunities until next year. Next slide, please. Aquatic ecosystems restoration and protection projects. This is the last activity I'm going to talk about. This is a relatively new authority that was actually in the fiscal year 2019 omnibus bill, and that we've been working on developing. There is $250 million in BIL funding over the 5 years for this activity. So we are working on developing a new competitive program for these projects right now. I think we're hoping to maybe have some additional information that's out this summer, and then planning to have a funding opportunity out in the fall. So there is funding in the president's budget request for this activity. I think there's $1 million in the president's budget request. And since we don't have enacted appropriations yet, there isn't any actual funding available right now, but we are hoping to make funding available in the fall. The project types here are the design, study, and construction of aquatic ecosystem restoration and protection projects. The goal here is to improve habitat, which can include a number of different activities. Funding amounts, the non-federal cost share requirement here is 35%. So again, a little different from some of the other activities. And there is $250 million available from the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think I mentioned that already. Next slide. So here's just some links and resources for you. We do have a separate BIL website that you can go check out. It has all the information about bipartisan infrastructure law. There's also a separate email if you have BIL questions. And then I think there's also a form on that BIL website where you can sign up to be on the email listserv specifically for BIL updates. And then we also have our Water Smart website, which I would definitely recommend you go check out. As I mentioned, there are other activities that are part of Water Smart that I didn't cover today because they weren't specifically identified in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So there's other opportunities out there that we talk all about on our Water Smart website. And you can also sign up for our email list to get updates about Water Smart activities by sending an email to that email address right there. If you're interested in a particular part of Water Smart or program, you can put that in the subject line. So you can send an email to that email address and just say, like Title 16 email list or desalination email list, or whatever it is that you're most interested in, and you'll get added to that list for that program. that's all I had.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. A lot going on. I love to see some of those new funding opportunities. You're getting more creative all the time for some of our watershed needs. All right. Thank you for that. I see questions starting to roll in, so we'll get back with you a little later on some of those questions. Let's move to our third speaker, John Wynn. John is a water resources engineer for the California Department of Water Resources and has been with the Department of Water Resources since 2015. He works in the Project Services Office, where he provides support for grant programs across the department. So with that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John, and I have my team listed here, and they're here today to for any question at the end. Next slide, please. So I'm here to share with you a quick overview of the new California grant portal. This is the URL of the portal, and I'll go more in detail on the next slide. So California grant portal is managed and hosted by the California State Library. It was created because of the Grant Information Act of 2018. It's a centralized location for state grants opportunities. There are currently 163 grants opportunity in the portal. Eight new grants opportunity has been added in the past week with a total of $22.6 billion available. Next, I'll give a quick demo of the live demo of grant portal. So I will share my screen here. All right, so this is the California grant portal. On the first, there are a couple of ways to use the California grant portal to look for grant opportunities. The first way is to use the drop downs in the main page. You can select the different type of applicants. You can look for as far as different grant categories and then the time frame. So I'll give a quick demo of, let's say we want to look for water and environmental. You can look for grant opportunity here. This page will give you a more refined result where you can find basically everything that within the state of California that related to water and environmental. There's different categories that you can also go in. And another way is to look for grant portal is go to the find grants hyperlink here. On this page, it brings you a very similar page where you can search for example, water. Okay, so here you can find just as far as Department of Water Resource and hit apply filters, you'll be able to find everything that related to our department. And you will see forecasted grants and active grants. And that was just a quick demo of how to find grants in grant portal. Let's get back to the PowerPoint. Next page, please. So there's a way to subscribe to California Grant Portal. One of the most frequently asked questions is, can I get new grants opportunity emailed to me? The answer is yes. You can subscribe to email updates on all new grants opportunities, or you can also subscribe to the category, depending on grant categories. And to subscribe it, just there's a subscribe hyperlink right above the page on the right-hand side. Next page, please. So there are a few active grants within our Department of Water Resources at the moment. The first one is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant Program. This one, the application deadline is in a few days, February 28, 2022. The total funding is $152 million. For more information, you can use the link below for more details. Next page, please. The next one we have is the Small Community Drought grant program. This one application deadline is December 29, 2023, with a total funding of $190 million. The website where you can find more details on small community is listed right below there. Next page, please. There's a few forecasted grants within Department of Water Resource in grant portal. The first one is the Prop 1 Round 2 Integrated Water Management Implementation Grant. This one, the anticipated open date will be spring 2022, with the total funding of $192 million. The program website where you can find more detail is listed in the blue link. Next slide, please. The next one we have is the Riverine Stewardship Grant Program. This one, the anticipated open date will be March 2022, with a total funding of $6.5 million. Program website is also linked here for more details. Next slide, please. Urban Stream Restoration Program is also anticipated open date is March 2022, with a total funding of $10,780,000. More detail can be found on the link below. Next slide, please. So we have additional information on our California Department of Water Resources website at water.ca.gov. Next slide, please. Another great place for grant and loan opportunities will be on our Department of Water Resource grant and loan page. Here you can find active solicitations. You can find shortcut to the grant portal with active and forecasted grants. You may find more news and upcoming grants event, and also link to all of our grant program page. Next page, please. CFCC is also a great place for information. You can view upcoming funding fair information. You can view recordings of funding fairs. CFCC also hosts funding fair throughout the year with breakouts one-on-one sections. You may also submit an inquiries for common funding through CFCC. There's also a handbook available on our CFCC website, and there will be spring and fall virtual fair coming up. Next slide, please. Many of our grant programs are also on DWR listserv. You may subscribe to them for direct information from the link that listed here. Next slide, please. We are also on social media. So if you have any type of social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram, you can follow us for news and updates. Next slide, please. Next, I have one of my colleagues from the Southern office, Brian. I have a few words.
Hi, good morning. Apologize, my video is not working this morning. I did want to introduce several of our staff from our Southern Region office. First off, my name is Brian Moniz. I'm out of our Southern Region office in Glendale, and I am the Southern Region Regional Coordinator. I have my hands in the grant programs as well as outreach and engagement for Sigma. We also have our Southern Region Tribal Liaison, who is Jennifer Wong. Jennifer does coordinate with all tribes in our Southern Region. And then Pakiza Chata is our local contact for Sigma and IRWM. Pakiza is involved with managing grants in the area with both Sigma and IRWM grant programs, and is a good source for getting information on the grant programs. And then lastly, I did want to introduce our office manager, Vic Nguyen. Vic has been our office manager for a number of years now and does have a high-level overview of the grant programs as well as Sigma and IRWM. Thank you, John.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Brian. I'm Maria Lorenzo Lee. I work for the Department of Water Resources in the Division of Regional Assistance under the Disadvantaged Community and Tribal Involvement Program. As John mentioned, and also Vincent mentioned, listservs, very important to apply to those to learn more about other agencies. And here I just wanted to provide 4 examples of information that we've received just by being on sister agency websites. So 3 of them just came in this week. Although they're not the department's grants, again, we want to share them with you. And if you have any questions, please go to their websites. So the first one here is the California Department of Conservation. The Multi-Benefit Land Repurposing Program seeks to increase regional capacity to repurpose agricultural land and reduce reliance on groundwater. Their application deadline is April 1, 2022. The second one here is from the California Strategic Growth Council. It's the Transformative Climate Communities, the TCC program, which funds community-driven development and infrastructure projects that build climate resilience and achieve environmental health and economic goals. And I believe, was it East Riverside might have applied. In round 4, the TCC will award planning grants of $300,000 for, and then implementation grants of $35 million based on a competitive basis. Next slide, please. So this one is from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. It's a new one-time state-funded Prepare California Jumpstart program, $15 million in total state funding to help eligible socially vulnerable and high hazard risk communities. The application is due by email on Monday, the 28th, but there's still time. They actually have 2 webinars. One is today at 11 o'clock, and the other one is on Monday at 11 o'clock. Those links there are live, and if you have any questions, please let us know. I'll also put them in the chat if you want to join today or on Monday. And then you have their websites there. The last one here is the State Water Resources Control Board. We just got this week they opened a countywide and regional funding solicitation for counties and eligible partner entities to receive funding to implement countywide or regional programs that address drought related and or contamination issues for any state water systems. And they have 2 webinars that are coming in March 2nd from 10 to 12 and March 4th from 10 to 12. So I'll place a flyer in the chat for you. And if you have any questions, you can contact or go to their webpage right there. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Vic or John.
Thanks, Maria. So I just wanted to introduce myself as well. I'm Vic Nguyen, and Southern Region Manager for the Department of Water Resources. Our department has 4 offices throughout the state. Our office is based in Glendale, California, and we cover pretty much 10 counties, about 10 counties in Southern California, including Riverside County. And the 10 counties represent about 40% of the state's geographical area. We have a staff of about 45 employees. Several of them work on the grant programs under Brian's shop. We also work on a number of other programs and initiatives. So we're the face of the department. So we push out programs and implement programs on behalf of the department in our region. And other programs, including Sigma, NFIP programs, flood management, restoration, environmental programs. Salt Sea is a big program under our shop as well. So anyways, Brian is in charge of the funding program, and he has introduced the staff. If you guys have questions, feel free to contact any one of us. Thanks. Turn back to John.
Yep, and that is all we have for today as far as the Department of Water Resources. Thank you.
All right, John, thanks you. Thanks for the team. I like the team approach. Get lots of people listening. if you're not pinging us with questions, you're missing a great opportunity. So there are a few starting to roll in. A little reminder here: you can send your questions privately to Grace or through the chat feature, publicly through the chat feature. We'll also be looking for people to raise their hand. So go to the reactions at the bottom of the screen and you can raise your hand. If you can't figure out how to do that, you could try waving your hand the old-fashioned way, crazily like that, and maybe we'll catch you. But if there are any unanswered questions, we'll make sure that we'll be following up with those. So with that, panelists, I hope you're ready. I see some questions starting to roll in. So let's see, let's start off, Vincent. Has Eastern obtained any grants for projects that have not completed CEQA?
No, not that I'm aware of. Usually, going back to some of the information that I mentioned, we also during our alignment with some of the projects, we make sure that CEQA is usually underway. But it all depends on the timing of the project, the CEQA process, and then at the same time too, the external funding opportunity as well.
Well, I think also, in my experience, most of the funding windows are very small. You know, they want most grants require projects to be very completed very quickly. So if your CEQA isn't underway, it's going to be really hard to meet the grant deadlines for project completion.
Yeah, most of our projects are, when we apply, are shovel ready.
And what kind of timelines do you typically see in the grant requirements?
Timelines as far as
project completion.
Project completion. Some of the grants that we're kind of looking at right now have project completion dates of like 3 years out, some 4. So it depends. It also depends on the size of the project too, and how long the duration of construction and all that to get it completed.
All right, thanks. For Amanda, for post-grant approval, how is funding impacted if project runs through delays and cost overruns? And then a follow-up question, maybe for you and John, is there a difference between state and federal grants in this regard? So what happens when your project costs start going south on you?
Yeah, I'm guessing there are differences between state and federal. There usually are. On our end, the cost is not something that will be adjusted on our end in terms of the amount of funding that you would be receiving. In most cases, once the funding is allocated, that's the amount that you're going to receive, regardless of whether your project costs go up. In terms of the time frames, we do offer time extensions when they are needed. We have different processes depending on the program for folks who have financial assistance agreements to request time extensions for their agreements.
Okay, thank you. John, any comments from the state side?
Brian, do you have any comment on?
This is Maria.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so I have a comment. I just wanted to say there's just a lot of opportunities for the federal and state funding to leverage each other, sounds like, but I know it depends on timing, but that it sounds like there's an opportunity here for federal and state funding, leveraging each other's.
Yeah, no, it's great to have a multiplier effect on the projects if you can use both avenues.
Yeah, Brian here. Just did want to comment on the CEQA question as well. A lot of our grant programs now are requiring CEQA to be complete prior to getting funding. So keep that in mind as you're thinking of projects. It's good to hear that you're thinking about shovel-ready projects. Those are the types of projects that do well in the scoring as well as local scoring as well is what I understand.
All right, thank you. John, is there an anticipated date for the next funding fair? Any sense on if it may be a virtual or in person?
So Maria is in charge of the most of the funding. We should be able to answer those questions.
Hi, everybody. Yes, our next fairs will be virtual. We're looking around the April, May timeframe, but yes, we just had that. And David White from USVR attends, as well as other state and federal agencies. So this is a great opportunity if you can attend around April to register and go. So it's cfcc.ca.gov is the website. Thank you.
Excellent. Amanda, another one for you. Can SRF funding be used to meet non-federal cost share requirements for Title 16?
Yes, it can. So both SRF and actually WIFIA funding can be used as non-federal cost share under Title 16, as long as it is a loan that will be repaid by the non-federal project sponsor. So I know there are some SRF grants. If it's a grant, then it would not be able to be applied as non-federal funding, but as long as it's a loan that will be paid back, then it can be counted as non-federal.
Awesome. John, can you apply for grants directly from the CA Grants portal? And follow up the CA Grants portal, list all grants within the state of California.
All right, so I'll let Brian take care of these questions. Brian.
Brian's muted still. All right, John, anyone else? Brian, not getting a response from Brian.
Yeah, so I'll answer these questions. So no, so the question was, can I apply for grant directly from CA Grant Portal? And the answer is no. The grant portal hosted information about the grant opportunity offered by different state agencies. To find more information on how to apply for each grant, you can basically click on those individual grants to get more details. And grant seeker must have to apply to the grant making agency. So you will basically go, once you in the detail page, you'll be able to find the hyperlink to details on how to apply for those grants.
Thank you. For Vincent, we must have an accountant in the audience. How do you capitalize loan interest payments?
So the district no longer capitalizes interest on our loans. These are expenses that when incurred.
So you don't.
Short answer is no.
Amanda, are inland brackish groundwater desalination projects eligible under the desalination funding opportunity?
They are. So the desalination funding opportunity includes ocean or brackish desalination projects, which can include brackish groundwater projects.
Okay. I'm curious, Amanda, about something. Your large scale projects, I noticed that you don't have a large budget for that. So it seemed, just looking at the numbers offhand, if the project has to be a minimum of $500 million and you only had, what was it, 400 or 450 million in the overall budget, it seems like it's only going to fund a couple of projects or a few projects. What do you think the future is for that? Because you know, like what's happening here in California, there are big recycled water projects on the books in various areas that are going to certainly qualify for that. And, you know, I off the top of my head, I can think of 5 projects just in the state here. And you've got, this is your federal budget, right? So this has to cover all of the Bureau's area.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So yeah, the BIL includes $450 million for that program over the 5 years. I think you're right that that won't go that far when you're talking about these really large projects. It will be allocated through a competitive process. So, while we haven't made any decisions on that new program yet, my guess is that there will be some effort to spread the funding around the same way that we do in the Title 16 program. Since what we generally hear from stakeholders is that some federal funding is better than no federal funding. So while it's unlikely that we could actually get up to that full 25% of the total project cost for some of these really large projects that we know about, we are hoping that we can at least make the most of that $450 million that we have and be able to provide it to a few different projects through our competitive process. If anyone out there has projects that are large scale that we don't know about, please let us know. We don't know about a lot of these projects. I've heard that number a lot, like 5 or 6 projects. That's what we've heard a few times in different spheres, but we don't know of that many. So it'd be great to hear from folks that do have large scale projects so that we get kind of an idea of who's out there. And then, I do actually think most likely most of the projects are going to be in California. The reality is that water recycling on that scale is not happening in many other states that I know of, at least. So my guess is that most of the large scale projects are going to be concentrated in California and maybe Texas.
Well, for sure, because you can't have a large scale recycling project with a large scale sewage treatment plant. So it's definitely population center based. No, it's really interesting. So So I guess how do you as an agency get through that? How do you decide when people, or how you're going to spread that 25% funding? Do you look at all the projects that potentially would be applying and then say, well, we're going to split this, 10% each, because obviously we don't have enough money for 25% each. So is there an internal strategy that you're going to be better off getting in early before a bunch of other projects get in? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so again, no decisions have been made, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But my best guess is that we're going to be using a competitive process to allocate this funding. I don't see that changing. That's what we do for pretty much all of our funding. And actually, I don't have BIL in front of me to remember if it may even require that in the language, if they've written it similar to like WIN. So it'll be like Title 16 and DSAL, where we use the competitive process to allocate the funding. So it'll be based on how well a project scores against the evaluation criteria that were put in the funding opportunity. And usually the way that works, like for Title 16, where the funding requests are much larger in many cases than the funding we have available, and we can't meet everyone's full request, is funding is allocated based on the ranked order of the project. So the higher your project scores, the higher your funding amount is going to be, basically.
Excellent. For John, what is the do you know what the status is of the Prop 1 storage projects?
Okay, so Maria will have more information on the Prop 1.
I don't have the latest. Do you mean the Prop 1 round 2?
Well, I don't know. That's not my question.
Because the Prop 1, sorry, the Prop 1 round 2 PSP and guidelines just ended their public comment period Friday, the 18th. So we're still assessing comments. And but we did have an anticipated date. We changed it to September 2022. So on that Prop 1 round 2.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that answered the asker's question. Maybe while we have a bunch of grant experts on here, I think everyone's always looking for a competitive advantage. Maybe each one of you could just give us kind of the insider's pro tips. What do you do? Maybe Vincent, start from an agency perspective. You've got a group that's very dedicated to winning these grants. What are some of the tricks of your trade to be successful?
Well, I know what we've done in the past, especially for large scale projects, is we've scheduled a meeting with some of the funding agencies, the representatives, and kind of gave a virtual presentation of the project and what the intent of the project is, and get some feedback early on our project from the funding agency. That way, we know whether to proceed with external funding or not. If this is going to be a high scoring project, and yeah, just get overall get support early from the external funding agency.
John, any tips for the participants on the Zoom today from the state's perspective, or from your perspective? Really, we want to know what hits home when you're going through applicants.
So I think a lot of it is due to attending fairs, funding fair, and those will be very helpful as far as answering questions that you may have. I work in the grant track and review portal as well, and we help program to submit solicitation. We design solicitation, also help applicant submit an application. So a lot of times, some of the questions are already listed on the guidelines. Understand the guideline is always a great way to submit application. Vic, you have any other suggestion?
No, not from that point of view, but there was a question about the Prop 1 storage. I think the comment or question person asking was referring to the Prop 1 water storage investment program, and the California Water Commission administers, I believe, that program, and say they would be the one who would have updates on what was approved or what's on that process.
Vic, that's the program from whatever it was, 2014, the $2.7 billion proposition money for statewide storage. I think that's what the reference is.
Right.
Not my question, but I'm guessing. Amanda, what about you? Insider tips? What's the pro tip to be successful?
I think my best advice would be to read the funding opportunity very carefully. Make sure you're providing all the required information and provide as much detail in response to the evaluation criteria as you can. Those are, really the meat of your proposal. Again, use that competitive process. So the evaluation criteria are how we're going to score your proposal, and how your proposal scores is going to determine whether or not you get funding. So make sure you're addressing those criteria carefully and providing a good level of supporting detail.
Excellent. I got a couple more rolling in here. For John and Amanda, are there funding opportunities for municipalities that aren't water districts and aren't city or counties with water utilities? That's a pretty broad category. So are there funding opportunities for people that aren't in the water industry?
So
there are. You have to find
there
them.
are, yeah. I mean, I think the detail that's important there are you looking for grants for a water project? Like, is the question, if you are a municipality, not the water district, but there's a water related project, would it be eligible? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe.
I kind of interpret that to some of your later slides were, talking about maybe habitat conservation programs or restoration projects and things like that, which I think are great opportunities. It's really nice to see, I don't know if this is the right word, branching out into watershed wide things. But those are some great opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is probably, right? Depending on what you're interested in. There definitely is some broader eligibility in some of our programs, so where you don't have to be a water district per se. So I would just look carefully at the eligibility in each funding opportunity to see.
And Craig, I have a comment there at the grants.ca.gov. There is the check boxes that you can select, but also I wanted to go back to the Cal OES FEMA grants. They are by county, but you do need either to have a local hazard mitigation plan or plan to have a local hazard mitigation plan, an LHMP, to apply for those. But you don't have to be a water district. You can be a county, nonprofit, things like that.
Okay. We have a pretty broad audience, so I think you're seeing that come out in some of these questions. Here's one from kind of the building sector. Are there any grants to help new home builders or owners of multiple residential housing units with building and or refurbishing homes to become more water efficient? So money to help developers become more water efficient.
I think on Grant Portal, there's a way you can search for categories, and there is a category for housing, community, and economic development. So that would be a great checkbox to go about, and it will display as far as all of those grants that's available within the state of California.
All right. I guess for all the panelists, there's a couple of comments about money for large-scale water storage or conveyance. Maybe more from the federal side first. Any money, we talked about desal and recycling and things. What about storage and conveyance?
Now we're really out of my wheelhouse, but
That's good. Tell us what you know.
so what I know is that the WIN Act did include opportunities for funding for storage projects from reclamation. That is run out of our reclamation law administration group. And that would, the main point of contact for that is Carrie DeRoll, but I think she's out on maternity leave right now. So it's Austin Ola. He would definitely be the best person to talk to. He's going to have a lot more details. Because I don't know, the WIN Act technically expired. I don't know if BIL impacted that or not the way it did on the recycling side. What I do know is that BIL, and the words large scale were in there, so this may not be on point, but BIL did include an authority for a new program also being run out of our RLAD office for smaller scale storage and groundwater storage projects. So that is a new authority and a new program that's being developed right now. But those are smaller scale projects. They're not going to be on that same, scale as a more traditional storage project.
Okay, thank you. For the whole panel, what is the role of lobbyists in the final eligibility decision, especially when you have multiple projects competing for a limited grant opportunity? How important is it to have a lobbyist helping you?
I guess I can answer from the federal side. As far as we're concerned, it doesn't matter at all. But, in terms of whether you're getting your agenda through Congress, and that then obviously can dictate our programs and our authorities. That's where it would have an impact, not directly in interactions with us, but if you have a lobbyist who's managed to get your new authority passed in a bill, and we then develop the program that implements that authority, then in that way, it could obviously be effective.
What about from the state side? Any thoughts on if it's valuable to have a lobbyist working with you?
I think the state process is very similar to the federal process, and I would agree with what Amanda said. One of the earlier question was also on conveyance, money for conveyance, and from the state's perspective, I believe I remember seeing that there was, on the January 10th governor's budget, there was some proposed funding for Delta conveyance. And I don't think we'll know until the final budget comes out, but that was what I remember seeing.
Thank you. Maybe my perspective on lobbyists, I don't think that there's much benefit in hoping that a lobbyist is going to go and convince the Bureau or the department to approve your project over someone else's in a program. But I think the lobbyists are very effective at helping to find grant opportunities. They have, they're reading through all the material that has been coming up on the chat also. There's been lots of links to good material. And, I know with our lobbyists, we're really encouraging them to do all that work behind the scenes to find the right opportunities. So we're applying for grants that we're qualified for. And if you're not fortunate like Eastern to have a whole department with Vincent doing this for you, you often need someone else to help you find the grants. And then the other thing that I think you've heard quite a bit today is there's a lot of communication that you need to do with wherever the grant's coming from, whichever department. You want to be communicating with them and making sure that you're learning everything you can learn about that grant opportunity, so you put forward a very successful grant application and make it easy for your agency to move to the top of the list and get an award. I don't see it as a lobbyist is going to push you there. I think in today's environment, it's a good project that pushes you there. So that would be my encouragement with your lobbyists. All right, we're running out of time. I got one last question. At WRCOG, we often get asked for letters of support. How important are letters of support for agencies that are providing the grants?
I can answer for reclamation here. So I think it depends on the funding opportunity. For some of our funding opportunities, there is an actual evaluation criteria about collaboration. I would say letters of support are important if they are adding support for a statement you've made in response to an evaluation criterion. So if you say we're coordinating with such and such entities, and then you have a letter of support from those entities to back that up, that's where they're going to come into play. Or if you say our project is going to have such and such environmental benefits, and then you have letters of support from nonprofits or state environmental agencies that back up that statement, that's where they're going to be important on our end.
Yeah, excellent point. What about on the state side? All right. Well, I think we've run to the end of our time. I would just like to thank all the speakers for their time and effort to participate with us and provide all this great information. Thank you very much. We need the applause sound effect for all of you since we're doing this virtually, but we really appreciate your time, and this is such an important topic. Water affordability is top of mind for every water agency. And, this is really helping the industry out to maintain that water affordability. So we really appreciate your time and your presentations and all the information that's been provided. A reminder, the presentation and the recordings will soon be available. The Riverside County Task Force will be messaging that out so you can get a hold of that. Our next speaker series event will be held on Friday, April 22nd at 7:30 in the morning. It'll be virtual. And that concludes our event. I just want to thank everyone. Have a great weekend. It's a beautiful, beautiful Friday here. And go out and enjoy it and enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.